we're really losing some components in these systems that's really, really valuable for biodiversity overall. And mainly these oak patches and grasslands, these more open environments. To maintain those types of habitats in the system requires such a frequency of fire.
Our community realized it was about bringing fire back to the landscape and preparing our private properties for fire.
You look at the special region of Northwest California, Southwest Oregon, and the Klamath-Siskiyou Mountains, and you'll think it's all natural. But that diversity and that kind of reference ecosystem that you're looking at to study was a cultural process as well. It was the ecocultural management of the native people that helped facilitate that diversity, and fire being one of the main ones.
All these single-age conifers across this landscape that is becoming a monoculture, and then, nothing can survive out there really, even wildlife. The habitat's fragmented.
It is important for me because being a basket weaver, this is what we've been looking for a long time, is having a good fire.
When the miners came in, they removed the native people out of their villages. There was, really brutal and it was a hard time for native people. Not only did they have to suffer with the diseases, then with the mining and with the early American settlement, there was outright genocide and then displacement out of those villages that then became the modern American towns. And that disruption of the native lifeways affected how frequently they were able to put fire on the landscape and manage their traditional areas, because those were becoming into private ownership. And then after the early 1900s, there was the creation of the National Forest Reserves that then became the National Forest Systems. And then in the early 1900s with the National Forest, there became the Forest Service. Well, in the west here, especially in the Karuk ancestral territory and the Karuk territory, a lot of that went into being the Klamath National Forest. Well, after the 1910 summer of very severe fires, they passed in 1911, U.S. Congress passed the Weeks Act. That essentially was a fire suppression policy that they felt in the best interest in order to conserve timber resources was to exclude fire. And so that became basically the top-down national policy mandate.
How we're looking at fire regimes, we tend to be looking at them from a quote, unquote, natural system. We try to look at these natural systems in it, and I think we really need to embrace some of the traditional fire regimes. And I don't see that happening right now, because if there's any one fire regime that's out of sync, it's the fire regime in the cultural landscape.
There was all this negative connotation put on fire, and if Indian people were seen lighting those fires, then they were kind of the devil in the woods. And there's some really propaganda, like Smokey the Bear types of forest posters and forest fire posters that come out that have things to that effect, that really was changing the public sentiment about acceptance of fire.
I think one of the major obstacles we have is that through the last 100 years of fire suppression, especially in our low elevation areas and especially around our private properties, we've seen landscape level change from a lot more open oak woodland, grassland, or early cereal shrub species that were maintained through frequent low intensity fire to even-aged closed canopy stands of conifers, in particular Douglas fir.
From the 1945 era all the way into the 1960s, you really saw an increase of the capacity of the federal government to build roads, suppress fires, and then also harvest timber, old growth timber, for the National Treasury, and then heavily restocked those with Douglas fir. And so you took an area that could handle fire and be more resistant and resilient to that, to then now being either clear cut and being brush or being really dense as this young stuff grew in there. And that's all those different waves of policies and land management essentially limited fire as a landscape process. And part of that was the cultural application of that.
Fires are burning hotter and longer into the season. It's getting just out of control. It's unmanageable. It takes out all the habitat in one swoop. But it all used to burn so often and everything was just dealt with so much. It was never that hot.
I think one of our biggest opportunities around here is that everybody, tribal people, the Forest Service, environmental groups, are tired of the status quo, which is doing nothing. And you know, we realize that we need to create a common vision for how we're going to protect our private resources while at the same time bringing fire back at the landscape level.
And essentially the Fire Safe Council started, to the best of my understanding, was a result of the National Fire Plan wanting to provide federal dollars to local organizations so that they could help private landowners address fire safety and dealing with fire as a natural landscape process.
We originally started in 2001 through a series of community meetings. We were able to get the community to rally around this idea of restoring our historic fire regime.
Well, the Fire Safe Council pretty much, you know, they came to me and said, hey, look, we have some crews and we have some people available. Do you have some work? And so working with the Fire Safe Council, we identified some areas. We looked at it from a strategic standpoint.
People just need exposure to prescribed burning. And you know, most people, when they think of fire, they don't think of a low intensity prescribed burn where you're stripping from the top down.
The great thing about a burn like this one is just that it has a potential to be a model for people all over this bioregion to understand that prescribed fire can be a really important management tool. And in this particular case, we're really so excited to have the landowner completely on board and taking responsibility for his part in this. It's really an exciting thing, you know, and hopefully it will, you know, prove to be an example for other people for future prescribed burning projects.
If we can make the private residents feel safe about how they have fire around their home, or that they're basically fireproofing or fire safe around their home, then when there's fire use or for fire restoration and reducing fire on the landscape and the national forest around them, they'll feel like they're protected, so they'll be more likely to support that.
Yeah, this oak grove right here in front of us, it started out as a fire safe project, what, 2-3 years ago we came in here? And at the time, you couldn't even see in here. You were lucky to be able to see an oak stem in here if you looked into this forest. And the Douglas firs were starting to come up through the top of these oaks and starting to shade them out.
We have a lot of willing landowners that understand the benefits of fuels reduction followed with prescribed burning. People have seen large wildfires come close to our towns and properties and understand the benefits of having a good fuel break around their house.
But after we got those trees out of here, then we came through, we did a lot of hand piling, we did some broadcast burning. So we treated this area here, and we treated above us and up at the upper end of the property.
Without running fire through there, you know, pretty soon after a treatment, the value and the integrity of that fuel break goes away.
But you still look and you can see there's a lot of Doug fir regeneration going on in here even now. And like a little creeping fire like this with these oak leaves now, as the fuel is enough to kill these little Doug firs.
To date, since